To me, like, I don't want my general training to be longer so that recognition can be shorter. I ain't cutting recognition for nothing because it's too important for you guys to know when you're winning. It's about winning. And by the way, the real training takes place where?
On the field.
In the field. In the field. This is just a dog and pony show, and I'm just the dog they put in front of you to sort of like entertain you this morning, right? So here's what I want to talk about this morning. This morning, and I'm going to talk a little bit more. We've been talking a lot about the system. We've been busting and growing. A lot of people have been growing, developing their skills. I'm going to intersperse in a couple of my trainings this month a little bit about personal improvement, a little bit about self-development, a little bit about personal growth, some very specific ideas that you can apply. If you don't apply them, this is just an Instagram live deal that you're just watching while you're sitting on the can. Okay? But if you actually take notes, write things down. Writing is better than like typing on your phone. I don't have time to get into the science as to why it is, but writing improves the learning. Rereading your notes improves the retention. Teaching somebody else concepts that you learn within 24 hours dramatically improves the retention one more time. And then actually practicing the ideas improves it really quick. Can I tell you who's really good at that, by the way? Yes? No?
Yes.
Dylan Hogsman. Like, I've taught him a couple of things. I wasn't even teaching. We're having a cup of coffee. We're talking about something. And like a week later, he goes, hey, you know that thing you told me? I just did da-da-da-da. I go, I don't even remember having the conversation. And he actually takes the time to apply it and gives me feedback on how it works. Like, that's a guy that's going to grow at a faster rate than the norm. Okay, so here's where I want to start this morning. It's not where I want to end. Hopefully I'll get through at least most of it. Let's start with thought distortions. Write that as your sort of big title. Thought distortions. Thought distortions. We all have them. I want to identify what they look like so that you're more aware of what they are and how they limit you in your capacity. If you look at most people, I've shared this many times before, if you look at most people that you know, like almost everyone you know, and you look at where they are today and where they were 5 years from now, here's what I can tell you about almost everyone you know. Their lives have changed a little bit, not dramatically. There's very few you can think of all the people you know where, man, over the last 5 years their lives have changed dramatically unless something happened to them. When I'm talking about changing dramatically, I'm talking about they intentionally, dramatically changed their life for the better over the last 5 years. Not like, not something that happened to them health-wise or relationally or they won the lottery or they got sued, right? I'm talking about they intentionally changed their life and it's dramatically different than it was 5 years ago. So people have the capacity to really dramatically change their lives. Most people don't. Why?
Fear.
It's the way you think. It's the way you think. We've got to change our thinking. We've got to change the way the greatest computer ever designed is programmed to get different results. The way yours is programmed right now is your life right now, most of you don't want to hear this, your life right now and the results that you're getting and where you're at, where your income or debts are, where you are in relationships with other people, where you are health-wise, is a direct reflection of the way you think. It's a direct reflection. God bless you. God bless everybody. It's a direct reflection. And so you've got to change the way you think for the reflections around you to change. Okay? So thought distortions. Let me give you some example of thought distortions. If a guest or an appointment cancels, my whole day is ruined. So I had a guest, they were confirmed, then they no-showed. It's like, oh man, my whole day is ruined. I had an appointment. I go to work. After work, I rush to the office. I'm meeting my field trainer there. We're getting ready to leave. We're on our way, and all of a sudden my appointment cancels. Oh man, my day's ruined. Right? Thought distortion. People will think I'm strange if I invite them to a meeting. You know what? If I invite a friend or a family member or a coworker or a mentor of mine to a meeting, they're going to think I'm strange. Thought distortion. You might want to write these down, especially if something similar to it applies to you. My friends won't like me if I set up a training appointment. You know what? Billy won't like me if I try and set up a training appointment with them. You know what? My friends will think I'm just trying to use them if I set up an appointment with them. My friends will think I'm just trying to make money off of them if I set up an appointment. My friends will think that I'm part of a cult if I invite them to a meeting. What are these? These are thought distortions. Inviting guests hasn't worked for me in the past. I've tried it. It's just not my thing. Inviting guests, I've tried that in the past. It just hasn't worked out for me. That's just not my thing. What is that? It's a thought distortion. It's a thought distortion. Thought distortions are like viruses on a computer. Thought distortions are viruses of the mind. We need to understand them and identify them before we can eliminate them. When you put any kind of virus protection software on your computer, for it to eliminate viruses, the first thing it has to do is identify the viruses and find the viruses to eliminate them. Okay. All of these are examples of what we call thought distortions. These are all examples of lies that we tell ourselves. Of what do we tell ourselves?
Lies.
Lies. The truth is far less harsh. The appointment getting canceled won't ruin your day. Setting up an appointment with a friend won't cause them to hate you. Inviting people to a meeting won't cause them to think that you're strange. Most of them probably think you're strange anyway. Okay? It's not you inviting them to the meeting that caused them to think that, trust me. Right? Most of you think I'm strange, I'm okay with that. All of these are thought distortions. It's a fancy way of explaining how our minds, how our limiting beliefs, how our identity convinces us of things that are not really true. How many of you are parents by a show of hands? How many of you have parents by a show of hands and were kids at one time in your life? No matter how long ago. Think of the boogeyman in the closet. Is it real or is it a thought distortion?
Real.
It's a thought distortion. But in the mind of a child, it's freaking real. You as the parent understand it's a thought distortion. Your role is to try and help them see that it's a thought distortion. And maybe after a couple of times they've seen it, maybe then when they get those thoughts in the back of their mind, they realize it's a thought distortion. They no longer believe it to be true. They may have some sort of anxiety, and they may still want to crawl in bed with you, but they no longer label that anxiety a boogeyman in the closet, right? What's another example? This wouldn't apply to you guys. I just tried to use examples from my own personal life. Probably won't apply to any of you guys. Thinking that if I go in the pantry and sneak a late night snack in the pantry when everybody else is in their bedrooms, the calories won't count because nobody saw me eat it. Right? That's a thought distortion. My body still processes the calories as calories regardless of whether anybody sees me eat it or not. Right? The best way to combat thought distortions is to understand their nature. I'm going to go through a series of 6, I think, 6, I think, different types so that you understand them better. Is this helpful at all?
Yes.
Okay. First type, I want you to label all or nothing thinking. All or nothing thinking. What kind of thinking?
All or nothing thinking.
Tony Robbins calls these global beliefs, all or nothing thinking. We tend to classify things into 2 categories. We tend to classify things into 2 categories. For example, let's say I leave the meeting today and I go eat a gigantic lunch. And I'm just like stuffed and feel gross afterwards. Then I tell myself, I'll never be able to eat good. I'll never be able to be serious about eating. I'll never be able to lose the weight. Why? Because I had one bad experience. You're driving home from work and you're like fired up. There was a conference call that you were on last night. You're like, tomorrow I'm going to make calls. Here's what I'm going to do as soon as I get off work, blah, 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 blah. You get off of work and you get distracted and you eat dinner and you watch a Netflix and you're like, crap, I'm never going to be able to get this business off the ground. I just can't seem to get myself to make calls. You set your alarm super early. Tomorrow is the day I'm starting back. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Snooze, snooze, snooze. You know, man, I'm never going to get in good shape. It's all or nothing. One thing dictates everything. How many of you know somebody that occasionally thinks that way? Say aye.
Aye.
Yeah. You got to be aware of those kinds of thoughts and the fact that these are your boogeymen in the closet. When you go all or nothing, it's a boogeyman in the closet. You've got to identify it as such to defeat them first, okay? Why is it boogeyman? It's 2019. Isn't that gender shaming?
Yes.
Boogie person, I think it should be. Boogie person, right? I just feel uncomfortable with that. We never say boogie woman, right? Actually, boogie woman, I wish she was in the closet, sort of. Right? It sort of creates a different thought distortion. Anyway, I digress.
Oh my God, Mr. Schloeman. Talk to me after.
Number two. Number two, mind reading. Mind reading is number two. Mind reading is one of the most prevalent thought distortions I see in our business. If I do this, people will think that. If I do this, people will think that. You're thinking for people. You're thinking for people. Warner had a guy the other day, and he had an appointment with Eduardo and Adela, and they had a closing appointment. I think it was a closing appointment, and they worked hard, prepared, they're all ready to go. We had talked it through, like he's really dialed in, this client really needs our help. They actually had a closing appointment, then they found out that the client didn't have it like a social security number, had like a TIN number or something like that, and Warner's like, bro, I don't know what to do. So he backpedaled, he said, I'm gonna find out what we can do. We've got hundreds of companies we work with. If anybody can provide you the solution that you're looking for, that you need, I can find it for you, because we do business with them. I don't know if we can, but if anybody can do it, we can do it. Let's schedule a time to get back together, and I need to do my research. He schedules a time to get back together, does a bunch of work, finds out the solution in a couple different areas. They come, they're ready to go, and the guy's like, hey, I gotta work late, is that what he said? Something came up, I can't meet tonight. Something came up. Like, that just leads to like all kinds of different possibilities that you can think of. And so I told Warner, I said, here's specifically one I want you to say in the text back to him. So Warner said that, and the guy said, I said, hey, like, I totally get that, right? I said, he's probably finishing a job. He probably didn't finish, he's a tile layer, right? I go, the job's probably taking longer. He has to stay later. That's why he's probably canceled. I said, tell him, hey, I understand. As soon as you finish the job, why don't you just give me a shout on the way home, and we'll get something scheduled then, because I want to strike while the iron's hot. I don't want to wait till the next day. So Warner does, and then like, I tell him like 9:30, if you haven't heard from the guy, he's probably on the way home or home by then, text him then as a follow-up, right? Warner does it, doesn't hear anything back, right? In Warner's mind, because he hasn't done this as many times as mine, the fact that the guy didn't respond, it's easy for him to, I know what the guy's thinking. He's blowing me off, he's not interested anymore, he doesn't want me to bug him anymore. He's thinking for the guy. I go, what's going on? Here's what I want you to do. I tell him how to run the play the next day. The next day the guy responds like, I've been so busy, I'm so glad you followed up, I really want to meet with you. When Warner was thinking for him, he was thinking crazy stuff. I have 3 teenagers, 2 of them drive. If we say, hey, we want you home by 11:30, and it's 11:35 or 11:45 or midnight or 12:05, my wife's mind immediately goes to a psycho killer kidnapped our kids. They're torturing them in Tijuana right now. And like, that's where her mind goes, because when she doesn't know, she fills it with the worst case possible scenario. Mm-hmm. We do that too when we think for people. Mm-hmm. It doesn't benefit you to think for people, okay? And here's what we oftentimes will do. Well, one time somebody gave me a message like this and they were blowing me off, so now all the times in the future I get a message like this, it means they're blowing me off. No, it's like I was talking to one of my other leaders that runs an office, and I heard about their leadership meetings, and here's what their leadership, and I go, ooh, this is bad news, and the SMDs here know that I don't fall for these tricks, but they're tempting. It's like, well, yeah, we had a guy come out of that class, and here's what they said about that class. Or I had a guest at the meeting, and here's what the guest said. Oh, well, we need to change everything we're doing to accommodate, because obviously we're doing this wrong. No, there's one freaking guest. we're not changing everything we're doing because one guest, like, it was one guest, right? It was one person in a class. I'm not saying I don't want to hear about it, but I'm not immediately reacting to one person's opinion. His wife might have screamed him down, served him divorce papers this morning, right? His kids text him, I hate you, I don't ever want to see you again. And then, like, he gives me a bad opinion about the meeting. It's like, also, we got to change everything. It has nothing to do with the meeting. Does that make sense? Mind reading. People will think this if I do that. You think for your parents, you think for your spouse, you think for your kids, you think for your uncles and your tias, you think for your cousins, you think for your friends, you think for your coworkers, that if I do this, people will think that. And the fact of the matter is, you have no idea what they're going to think. I've been married 21 years. I don't always know what she's thinking. She doesn't always know what I'm thinking. Sometimes when we get in a disagreement, and I have to tell her, stop disagreeing with me, listen to me, right? So that we can resolve that. You know that's how it works, right? You gotta convince the young single guys of that. Sometimes when we're in a disagreement, she'll go, I'll say something, she'll go, oh, I know what you meant by that, blah, 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 blah. I'll go, huh? That's not what I meant by that at all. It's literally, how many of you have ever been in a situation like that where somebody goes, I know what you meant by that, and like, they couldn't be more wrong. Has that ever happened to you?
Right.
They're thinking for you. Where the disagreement gets out of hand is they're thinking for you with such conviction and confidence that they don't believe you. And they're wrong. Be very careful about thinking for people. And if you're in a relationship with somebody, trust is the most important element. You've got to give them the benefit of the doubt. If you can't trust them to give them the benefit of the doubt to say, okay, I misheard you, Kim, here's what I thought you meant. She goes, that's not what I meant at all. If I go, no, I know what you meant, then where's the trust in the relationship? There is none. She's more convinced she's right and she knows what I was thinking. What's her fear of giving in to me? Oh, I'm just saying that to get out of the disagreement, to get out of being in trouble. Well, if I'm constantly just saying things like that, then there's probably manipulation that shows up in other parts of our relationship. Does that make sense, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
That's just side benefit for people in relationships. But the key is mind reading. People will think this if I do that. Don't think for people, run the play. Number 3, unhelpful rules. Number 3, unhelpful rules. You adhere to strict rules that mess up your progress. What's an example? I had this happen in the past 2 weeks. Well, they teach us in the system we can only do an appointment at the office or at the client's house. So we had a situation where sitting down with the client, got great results, they give us referrals. One of the referrals, the agent is contacted and the referral isn't willing to meet at their house. They're like, well, we can meet at our office then, and the client is like, I'm not willing to drive all the way to the office, why don't I just meet you at Starbucks? And the agent was like, I'm sorry, we can only meet at your house or the office, that's it. And the client goes, I'm sorry, I'm just not willing to do that. I'd be willing to meet with you. You were referred by a friend of mine, but I'm just not willing to do that. The agent's like, sorry. Rigid things break. Now, if it's me, I'm probably going to say sorry. You know why? My schedule's maxed out. I don't have time for an appointment like that. If I'm you, or if I'm the me 2 decades ago when I'm starting, you bet your ass I'm running that appointment. I'm running that appointment. The other choice is I'm sitting at home and Netflix binging. I'm better off running a bad appointment in a bad market under bad conditions and not running an appointment at all. But understand this, that's the exception to the rule. Like, of my 10 appointments this week, 8 of them aren't at Starbucks. But every 3 weeks, if I run one there because I can't get it at the home or the office, yeah. And here's what I know going into it. The odds of me succeeding are much lower because I'm in the wrong environment.
Right.
I understand this is an exception to the rule. I understand I'm violating key core principles of the system. I understand it's probably not going to be a favorable result, but because my schedule isn't maxed out, I'd rather run the appointment, get the extra activity, work on my skills, take a shot at it, even if it's a long shot, than no shot at all. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not condoning doing that all the time, but And then here's the mistake from a coaching example. This person, after they made that decision and informed the client of that, they go, hey, I just want to run a situation by you. Here's what happened, here's what I said, and then here's what I told them. What do you think I should have done? A, you should have, if you wanted my feedback, you should have consulted me before you took action, not after, because there was time to do it. Right? I said, B, here's the advice I would give you. They're like, you're kidding. I go, no. What do you think I should do now? Try this now. I'd rather get too much information too soon in a coaching relationship than too little too late. Because when you give me too little of information too late, it's often too little too late.
Sure.
Make sense?
Yes.
If you're giving me too much information too soon, I'll let you know. But don't you be the judge of that, let me be the judge of that if I'm the coach, okay? I didn't get a strong commitment after the data collect, so I'm not going to go back. Yeah, no, I probably won't go back. And do you need to get strong commitments? Yes. You need to make a decision at your stage of the business. I didn't get a strong commitment. Do I have time in my schedule where I'd like to try and go back, present more information, and get a stronger commitment? Or because they said it's supposed to, after this stage, I'm supposed to get a strong commitment and then close, and I didn't get a strong commitment, so I'm not going to go do that. I would like, okay, it may be a waste of my time, but I'm going to go back. I'm not going to try and close, but I'm going to go back, go this far into the close and see if I can get a stronger commitment to close the next time. I would do that if I was you. Do you know how many pieces of, so you're supposed to close on that first closing appointment. You guys know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
With Dean and Steve system, it's like you have a first that's a presentation and data collect, and then you go back for a close, right?
Yes.
And with ours, it's a first, a presentation, a second data collect, and then a close. Do you know how many times I haven't closed on the closing appointment and I've scheduled a follow-up appointment and closed on that one? Or haven't closed on the second closing appointment and scheduled a third and closed? Do you know how many times I've successfully done that? But people are like, you have to do this, then you have to do that. Be careful of that. Be careful of being like too rigid and having unhelpful rules that cost you business. I'm like, I've already invested this much time in the client relationship of preparing the F&A and preparing the illustration and doing all this stuff. If it takes me one more appointment and I get the business, does my productivity go down? Yes. Does my pay per hour go down? Yes. But I'd rather have the client than not. Than walk away with nothing. But there's a process to doing that, okay? So unhelpful rules. My associate didn't follow through, so they must not want it bad enough. God, I hear that all the time from people. Well, my agent didn't do this, or my agent didn't do that, or my teammate didn't do this, so they must not want it bad enough. Guess who else didn't want it bad enough? You didn't. Guess who else didn't want it bad enough? I didn't, right? We've all had those periods of time, so to just sort of write somebody off, because it's like, well, you know what, I've invited them down twice and they haven't showed, they just don't want it bad enough. Well, don't want what bad enough? They have no idea what they're even missing out on if they've never sat through the presentation. Don't be so rigid. Don't have unhelpful rules that you're black and white about. Okay? I prefer a world that is 50 shades of gray to one that is black and white, if you know what I mean. I've even thought about adding a few shades. 50 might not be enough, but that's a different training. They're not dressed right, so they can't be allowed in. Warner, go tell them that they have to leave. They can't. That's rigid to me. I'd rather have them here and coach up their attire than not have them here. They're a guest. You know what we do in my family? We welcome guests. Unhelpful rules. My wife, literally, we're on our way to a high school football game last night. We're running late. It's the last home game of the season. It's senior night. She just knows it's going to be packed, and we've got my son Jack in the car. And she's like, she's talking half to me, half to Jack. And she's like, I can't wait to see where this one finds parking. Because, you know, like every parking spot, she goes, yep. She's like, he's going to be pulling in and looking to pull. She's like, oh, well, I think that's more of a guideline or a suggestion than a rule or a law. I think we can park here. I think it'll be okay. She goes, I can already see it coming, right? Yeah, and so sure enough, there's a parking spot right by the entrance to the football field, right? You know, the dirt thing right behind the home stands right there. And there's one of these big red, like, it's not a cone, but it's a big red plastic thing like that. I told him, I go, oh, it looks like they're saving that spot for us, Jack, and Jack inside of the car knows exactly what to do, and we pull it right there. So exactly as she predicted, right? She's like, well, what if? I go, what if what? What's going to happen? We're fine, right? Somebody put it there for a reason. I just don't understand the reason. I thought it was more of a suggestion than a reason, okay? Be careful of being too rigid with rules. Dean, I hope I'm not making you too nervous. Dean's sweating a little bit back here. Okay. Number 4, justification. Justification. In politics, people call this a straw man argument. Everybody give it up for Lori Fenelon. Woo! She's the only one that truly loves me this morning. Justification. You link two unrelated ideas together to justify a decision. You link two completely unrelated ideas together to justify a decision. Let me give you an example back to my weight. You know what? I could have some cake and ice cream for dessert because I had a salad for dinner. What's that got to do with it? I could have cake and ice cream for dessert because I had a salad for dinner. It's two unrelated events I'm linking together to try and justify making a bad decision. If I'm serious about losing weight, the cake and ice cream is a bad decision on its own, regardless of how many salads I ate this week. I can skip a meeting today because I'm not going to have any guests anyway. I can just skip the meeting today because I won't have any guests anyway. I don't even have invited any guests, right? Justification. Be aware of it. Where is it that you link two unrelated events in your business or your life and connect them together? Right? Number 5, delusional thinking. Delusional thinking. By the way, I'm a big fan of delusional thinking. My wife says I'm delusional all the time. She says I like... I can't tell you the conversation we had. She thought I was being delusional, but I was being delusional in creating a better world in my own mind that changes my behavior, that improves my life and our lives collectively better. That's the kind of delusional thinking that's okay. Like actually believing you could build a big base shop, go on and make $250,000, $500,000, $1 million bucks a year here. That's delusional thinking. And if you admit that to people that you know that aren't delusional, that are pragmatic and practical and logical, they're going to think you're completely delusional. But I think they're delusional in accepting what they're accepting in life and thinking that their life can't be completely different or better in 5 years. I think that's delusional. So choose your delusional. Now when you choose delusional the way I choose it, the masses will call yours delusional and they'll call what they're doing pragmatic, logical, common sense, realistic. Delusional thinking. You convince yourself of something that you don't really believe just to justify a decision. You convince yourself of something that you don't really believe to justify a decision. A small piece of cake doesn't really matter. It doesn't really count. Delusional thinking, of course it does. Missing one little meeting isn't a big deal. Delusional thinking, of course it is. As long as I don't quit, I'll eventually win in WFG. No, you won't. It's delusional thinking. Like, it's hard to win if you do quit, but not quitting isn't going to guarantee you success. This is not like a union job where, you know, as long as you have tenure, you just keep getting promoted and keep your job and don't get fired and keep getting little pay increases. It's performance-based. It's results-based, right?
Right.
So, delusional thinking is convincing yourself of something that's not really true to justify a decision. Can I just share with you guys something, honestly?
Yes.
The kinds of things I'm describing today, when I talk to you guys, I hear these things coming all the time from you guys. Sometimes I can give you feedback and point it out. Sometimes you're just not ready to receive it or don't want to receive it, so I don't even begin to have the conversation. Other times, you say you want feedback and I try and help you to see how delusional it is or how you're justifying it, and you're so attached to your way of thinking that you can't let go of it. Because this way of thinking gives you a sense of certainty and comfort that you're afraid to let go of. Because if I let go of it, it's like a sense, it's like a security blanket. My daughter had like, not a security blanket, but she had this cute little stuffed doll that she literally called It, right? But it was like a security thing to her. And so, like, as parents, we had to think of a process to, without like giving her PTSD, how to like get her to like surgically remove it from her grips, right? Some of us, this delusional thinking we hang on so tight to, and the truth of the matter is, it may have helped us get to a certain station in life, but it's going to keep us from getting to the next station. The truth is, it may have insulated us from the reality of the situation, and the reality of the situation is too painful to consider. So I delude myself into thinking that it's not as bad as it is because I don't want to feel the pain. But part of growing is feeling the pain. The pain causes us to be uncomfortable and causes us to change our behavior, because we'll do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. But if we have delusional thoughts that insulate us from the pain, then there's no pain to move away from. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I wish some of you would let me give you better feedback and better coaching on these things, because like I just hear it show up all the time. It's just like, you're so attached to it, I can't even begin to have the conversation. Number 6. We're at number 6. Can you believe it?
Yes.
Exaggerated thinking. Exaggerated thinking. I'm going to be late for the meeting anyway, so what's the point of going? I'm going to be late anyway, so what's the point of going? You know what? My last 2 guests didn't join, or my last 2 guest recruits quit anyway, so what's the point of inviting anyway? I've already tried that. What's the point? It's no big deal that I don't have any guests this week. Like some of you came this morning. It's not that you don't have any guests. You didn't make any effort or attempt to have any guests this week. You made no calls. You didn't schedule time with your field trainer to make calls. And you came this morning, and that's not a big deal to you. That's delusional thinking. That's exaggerated thinking. It's like, I want you to put it in your context of being an employee. Imagine showing up for work every day at your job with no intention of doing your job that day. But saying, well, I showed up, well, I didn't quit, well, I'm here to learn. How long do you keep that job for? How long do they keep paying you? How long do you keep getting the benefits for? Okay, so just to be like, your job is not to show up and listen to me say crazy stuff. That's not your job. That's not how we evaluate your performance. That's not how your family gets free. That's not how you make money. It's like you practicing the business, just like your job. The reason that you get to go back to work Monday, if you have a job, it's because through Friday you didn't do enough stuff wrong for them to fire you. Really? And if you did that much stuff wrong, there would be a paperwork trail of them documenting, trying to get you out of there. But to this point, you've done more of the stuff that they call work and that they value to keep you around. The fact that we let you keep coming back doesn't mean that you're doing all the right stuff at all. That's not an indicator. Does that make sense? So the fact that you don't have guests it can be acceptable if you gave it your best effort this week. If you gave it no effort this week, that's delusional thinking. You're telling yourself that you. Does anybody have 177 mental toughness secrets handy? Any of the SMBs in there? Got it handy in there? Would you grab it real quick? I want to finish on that because he says it better than I could. Woo! We're done, and the bell hasn't rung yet, and I've got like the whole second half of the training. So it's okay. I think. Let me just see if I can show 2 things. One is what Steve's going to bring me, and then 2 is, oh Christ! And 2, oh that's funny. Healthy Leaps. It's a cute post. Sam. Thank you very much. Give it up for Steve Adams. Woo! How do I get to bookmarked things? On Instagram?
Oh, on the bottom.
find things, like the most recent thing I bookmarked is from Sam Bactiar. Okay? So Steve Siebold, this guy was a world-class top 100 in the world tennis player. Started playing tennis when he was Giannis' daughter's age. And played through elementary school, middle school, played on the junior circuit, played in high school. What? No, I went to post. I'm gonna post the post and read it. Played all the way out, went professional after college, and here's what he found. When he finally hung up his professional career, he found that there were guys that consistently beat him at tennis, made more money at tennis, stayed on the circuit longer, did more of what he loved doing, that consistently beat him, that he knew in his mind weren't more talented than him. And so once he had to quit playing tennis, he was obsessed with figuring out, how can a guy not as talented as me keep beating me? How can a guy not as talented as me make more money? And so he interviewed, oh, I didn't hear the bell. Oh, okay. Thank you for joining us. He was obsessed with that. So he began interviewing successful athletes in all different sports, business people, church leaders, nonprofit, successful people, and he wanted to figure out what the hell makes them different. What the hell makes them different, right? Did you get it? Yeah, exactly. So, so he wrote this book called 177 Mental Toughness Secrets. It's one of my favorite books, especially for people who don't like to read, because every chapter in the book is 2 pages long. How many of you think you can read 2 pages, no matter how much you hate reading, right?
Yes.
Like, that's a good book to have in the can. You can knock out a chapter, right? Maybe 2. Like, it's literally 2 pages long. There's not a chapter longer. But it's, like, rich in content. It's real stuff, because he's obsessed with this, okay? So I want you to just listen to what he says about this. He's got actual chapters that deal on delusional thinking, but this is chapter 1, where he starts the book, I think applies to us the most. Now, he breaks down sort of the world into what he calls world-class people, upper class, middle class, working class, and the poor. Okay? Most of you, well, I know all of you, let's be honest. All of you are like upper class barely to somewhere down and probably lower working class. You're in here. This is how you were raised. This is the kind of income and net worth that your parents have or that you have as adults. Okay? I want you to listen to what he says about the way these people think, comparatively speaking. In 20 years of competing, coaching, and working with performers from various fields, I've discovered most amateurs suffer from mild to severe delusion in relation to their efforts and competencies. Look at your results right now and go, am I an amateur in the business at WFG based on my results in October, or am I a pro? Or somewhere in between, right? Because he says most amateurs suffer from mild to severe delusion in relation to their efforts and competency. They suffer from mild to severe what? Delusion. In relation to their efforts and their competency. Something to consider. In other words, most people don't delude themselves. In other words, most people, listen to this, most people delude themselves into thinking they are working harder than they really are. And that they are more competent than they actually are. Of the 5 major levels of consciousness, poverty, working class, middle class, upper class, and world class, my experience has been that performers at the middle class levels, you guys, suffer the grandest delusions. They're the most delusional in the way they think. More delusional than poor people are. More delusional than working class people are. Something to be aware of. The poverty level is barely surviving and living in a very harsh set of circumstances. The working class is punching a mental time clock and counting the days till retirement. They're usually not expecting much, and no one around them expects much either. They are typically not concerned about climbing any higher. It's the middle class that is the most incongruent with reality. The middle class is incongruent with what?
Reality.
He's talking about you, not people you know, just so you know. They are operating at a high enough level to understand that higher levels exist. Although they don't expect to get there, the thought crosses their mind from time to time. Because of their low expectations, their actions are incongruent with their desires. Their actions are incongruent with what?
Their desires.
Your desires. What's incongruent with your desires?
Their actions.
In other words, they want to live the life of the world class, but they're unwilling to pay the price. They want to live the life of the world class, but they are
Unwilling.
unwilling to pay the price. You're unwilling to pay the price that Deanne Charles just paid, quite frankly. You think she got lucky, or that she's naturally good at this, or some other BS delusional thinking that you're telling yourself that's not based on reality. It just makes you more comfortable accepting the fact that she's kicking your ass. She's burying you. And you feel more like you can disassociate from the pain by creating this delusional thinking that somehow it doesn't have to do with you and your thinking and your behavior, that somehow she gets some sort of free pass that you didn't get. It's delusional thinking. She's beating your ass week after week. Every week she has guests. I wouldn't hate her for it. I'd want to study her and learn from her and figure out what she's doing and how did she shift. She wasn't always this way. They want to live the life of the world class. She's on her way to doing that, but they're unwilling to pay the price. Since this reality is too harsh to bear, did I just sound harsh? Did I? Yes? Intentionally. Since this reality is too harsh to bear, they delude themselves into thinking they're doing everything in their power to get ahead. Of course they're not. Of course they're not. They'll tell you they're putting in far more time than they really are. They'll swear they're thinking about their vision all the time, but they're not. The world class is brutally honest with themselves, and they tend to look reality in the face. They err on the side of over-practicing and over-preparing. What would that look like in your business if you erred in the practice of over-practicing and over-preparing? How would that look with skills? How would that look with role-playing? How would that look with scripts? How would that look with presentations? How would that look with phone calls? How would that look like working with your field trainer? How would that look with prospecting? If you erred on the side of over-practicing and preparing, and over-preparing, because that's what the world class do. What time would you show up? What time would you leave? Champions know that to ascend to the top, you must first be operating from the mindset of objective reality. Self-deception and delusion have no place in the professional performer's consciousness. Self-deception and delusion have no place in the professional performer's consciousness. Does that sound like that chapter was written for the training I gave today, yes or no?
Yes.
What do you think caused me to realize that? You know how many times I've read this? As I'm training, I go, that's chapter 1 out of 2, who's got it? Because I've over-prepared, I've studied, I'm trying to master my craft, and I haven't mastered my craft. If I mastered my craft, I wouldn't be making freaking $500,000 a year. Like, I've got to learn, I've got to get better. There's delusional thinking that I have, that I'm aware of, that I'm actively trying to change. I'm actively working with Dan Schloeman, my coach and mentor, to help me blind spots, help me that can keep getting better. Let me wrap it up, because the guests are done. I got too much more to get into. I want you to think about this for just a second. Deanne Charles is the poster child for the most unassuming person in our office that you would expect success from. If we were playing WFG kickball, and you're the captain, she'd be the last person you pick on your team. Because why? Well, she's older, and you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and she doesn't seem to have a lot of self-confidence, and she doesn't have a lot of business experience. She was a stay-at-home mom raising 4 kids. She'd be the last person in WFG kickball that you picked on your team. If you didn't see anybody's results and didn't know anybody, you're just going through blindly and picking people to be on your team right now, she wouldn't be the first. She wouldn't be the first. What does that tell you? You heard her say with her own words, if she can do it, you can do it. She didn't get lucky. For 2 years, she told herself over and over and over, I'm not good enough, I can't do this. I'm not good enough, I can't do this. I'm not good enough, I can't do this. And it was a meeting like this that she made a shift and she goes, I think I can, I'm going to try. It's the first time she ever tried. What she began to tell herself was, I think I can do this, I think I can do this. And that thought began to replace the old thought, and she said it so many times that she began to convince herself that she could do it. And now she's beating everybody's butts. Not because she's more talented or smarter, or she's got a better market, or she's got a secret script, but she began to reprogram this and let go. The fact that she kept telling herself over and over, I'm not good enough and I can't do it, was delusional thinking. She replaced it with what many at the time, many of her family members at the time would have thought was delusional thinking. I can do it. I'm going to make it big. One delusional thought paralyzes you, where you do nothing. Another inspires you to take chances and try things even when you don't know how to do it. Let's help with the guests. Have a great week and a great November, everybody.
Nice to meet you.